Our final speaker is Patrick Reilly. If you think about this event wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Patrick Reilly. If it wasn't for what he experienced in his college that provoked him to seek something better. He started the Cardinal Newman site in 1993 with the mission, as we've talked about, to promote and defend faithful Catholic education. I started a podcast with Father Pavanka from Franciscan University of Steubenville, and I mentioned that, and he stopped me right at the beginning and said, think about that. How powerful a statement is that? To promote and defend faithful Catholic education, and that is what Patrick Reilly has created now, going on for 33 years, the reason we're all in this room. Patrick has been on numerous television programs, EWTN, Fox News, and MSNBC, and radio programs throughout the country and actually internationally. He's been awarded honorary doctorates from Benedictine College, from Holy Apostles College and Seminary, the Lumen Vitae Award from University of Mary in Bismarck, North Dakota, and the Catholic Culture Award from Our Lady Seat of Wisdom College. He's also served as an adjunct professor. If you know Patrick, he rarely sleeps. He'll send you a message at about 3 a.m. on Teams because he's studying or preparing for his next earned degree. So when you talk about the life cycle of continuous Catholic learner, we couldn't have anybody else as a better example of that than Patrick Reilly. So if you would, Patrick, come on up.
Of course, I missed my homework for this week, and my professor wants to know what's wrong with me. I can't remember what event it was I was attending, and I can't remember who it was I was speaking to. I've been racking my brain trying to remember it, but I distinctly remember someone scoffing at the idea of having more than one keynote speaker. He said, how can you possibly have more than one keynote? The keynote should be one note. And so I think perhaps we could say variations on a theme, right? And you'll see that in my talk. It's just amazing how, when you're talking about the faith, it all comes back to the one place. That's the whole idea, right? And so thank you very much for Dr. Kilpatrick and Kelsey for your wonderful talks. That was wonderful, beautiful. So I have the task of talking to you about St. John Henry Newman, recently named Doctor of the Church and Patron of Catholic Education. And I want to start with one word, which is not Newmanian, of course. It uses many words. Integrity. Integrity. It's a word that's rich with meaning and with implication. Integrity is derived from the Latin word integer, which literally means untouched. But it has the connotation of intact or whole. And most often today, Dr. Kilpatrick, we use the word integer in math or in science, right? And as you experts can correct me, but if I recall correctly, it means a whole number, right? But if I draw in my philosophy courses, the idea of a whole number depends on the concept of one, which is so much more than a number. Integer suggests identity. To know something is to know it as one. Integer suggests individuality. A substance can be distinct from another substance. Integer suggests wholeness, a substance that is composed of many things but is one. And even a living substance composed of body and soul can exist as one whole. And so integer is a concept that is foundational to our existence and to our experience of reality, and it's also a concept that's foundational to our Christian faith. The mystery of the Trinity requires a notion of integrity. God is integer, God is one, and integrity is of God. Okay, so thank you. You've been patient with my little detour. My topic is St. John Henry Newman, patron of Catholic education. But my thesis is that the single word integrity conveys much of who St. John Henry Newman was, how he viewed knowledge, how he understood Catholic education, and how he understood the very mission of his life. And integrity is also key to the reform of Catholic education. And this is why Newman is such an important example and an intercessor for that reform. Because integrity is what has been lacking in too much of Catholic education over the last 6 decades. And integrity is what exemplifies faithful Newman Guide Recommended education. And integrity is what parents want and demand of Catholic education. So, in the early 19th century, St. John Henry Newman came to Oxford University an evangelical. He distinguished himself as an Anglican minister and left Oxford a soon-to-be Catholic. After entering the Catholic Church in 1845, Newman was ordained a priest and established the oratories of St. Philip Neri in Birmingham and London. He failed to establish the university that he envisioned in Dublin, but he still left us his visionary plan in his book, Idea of a University. And he spent much of his remaining time leading the innovative oratory school for boys. He was declared a cardinal near the end of his life by Pope Leo XIII, the same pope who declared St. Thomas Aquinas the patron of Catholic education. And now Pope Leo XIV has declared Newman a doctor of the church and co-patron of Catholic education. So over the course of his lifetime, St. John Henry Newman was many, many things, and he could have been named patron of so many different things. He was a reformer of the Anglican Church as a leader of the Oxford movement, a preacher who attracted many students to his sermons. He was a convert cut off from his Protestant friends and his family and distrusted by the Catholics whom he had joined. He was an astute theologian who rejected that label. He was an oratory priest devoted to his parish and the poor, and a cardinal of the church. And so with all of these things, where's the integrity in all of this, right? He was so many different things. And I see Newman's integrity as an educator. Newman's integrity, the thread that runs through his life, is found in his devotion to education. His motto as a cardinal, cor ad cor loquitur, heart speaks to heart, was also his mode even in his early years at Oxford. He believes strongly that personal influence is the best means of teaching, and that all education should be pastoral, concerned for the good of the entire soul and not just the intellect. So if Newman's integrity as an educator, his personal integrity, was apparent throughout his life, so was his devotion to the integrity of knowledge. He understood clearly that all branches of knowledge, all sciences, are man's way of organizing what he cannot possibly understand in its entirety. And that's because the fount of all knowledge is in the mind of God, the Creator. And all things are from him, and all things converge back to him. Newman understood the university then as a place of universal knowledge, a principled place where many branches of knowledge could be studied in relation to each other, with the recognition that every branch has some bearing on the other, and nothing is truly separate. Theology, especially the study of God and his divine revelation, necessarily enters into every other branch of knowledge. It's foundational to every science because it's the study of the fount of every science. The university that excludes theology excludes the most important branch of knowledge and has lost its integrity as a university. And this is true, of course, of every other level of education, not just the university. And so I think many of you would be familiar with these arguments from Newman, and these basically lead into Newman's first argument for Catholic education. Unfortunately, many people stop reading Newman at this point, and there's so much more to his argument. He argued that an education that is not Catholic is not a true or complete education, and an education with integrity. And that's because catechesis and theology are not only an important branch of knowledge, but that they require protection from the other sciences, which tend to encroach upon theology, which tend to reduce it to a private matter. So Catholic education needs the Church to defend her teachings and to ensure fidelity. Also, he argued, if education is focused only or primarily on cultivating the intellect, which in its essence is the basis of education, and does not form the other faculties of the soul, the passions, and the will, which require moral training and virtue, then both the student and the teacher become distorted and possibly even dangerous to the Church. And finally, he argued the perfection of virtue and the perfection of reason are only possible with the grace of God, available to both student and teacher in prayer and through the sacraments. And without that grace, it's going to be a lesser institution. Education, therefore, he argued, needs the Church. In secular education, said Newman, quote, cannot be what it professes if there be a God. Another quote, he said, I want a laity not arrogant, not rash in speech, not disputatious, but men who know their religion, who enter into it, who know just where they stand, who know what they hold and what they do not, who know their creed so well that they can give an account of it, who know so much of history that they can defend it, unquote. So here John Henry Newman leads into his next point about integrity. We've talked about his personal integrity and the integrity of the university. He believed that the Church's purpose for setting up Catholic education is to restore the integrity of the soul of the student. Education, he said, should have no end outside of itself. The cultivation of reason, or what he called the philosophical habit of mind, is good in itself and should not be subjected to practical purposes, such as preparing for a career. And yet, Catholic education done well does prepare people for a career, and often much better than the common secular education. And so similarly, he believed that a truly faithful Catholic education, even done for itself, for its own value, repairs the soul of the student. And so from the Church's perspective, it provides a vital service. He said that the typical student would come to his classroom with the soul disintegrated by sin. Each of the faculties of the soul, the intellect, the will, the conscience, passion, appetite, can be found in the student warring in their breast, he said, each trying to get possession of him, like demons at war with each other. And what the student knows is good is not always what he desires, right? And when he desires the good, he often chooses the bad anyhow. All of it is in conflict. And this is not how God created man to be, Newman said. He said that in the beginning, by grace, God blended together all of our human faculties so that they acted in common toward one end: the will, the passions, the conscience, the intellect. And he said, a faithful Catholic education can achieve this again by cultivating the intellect together with cultivating virtue and forming conscience, and doing it all in a state of grace provided by prayer and the sacraments. And so, thus, the church's objective for education, he said, is, quote, to reunite things which were in the beginning joined by God and have been put asunder by man, unquote. I just love that characterization of Catholic education. You're restoring the integrity of the soul. Now, St. John Henry Newman himself was unable to achieve this education in his Dublin University, as he was thwarted by the competing visions of the Irish bishops and other factions. The reality that you all have to work with every day, right? He was much more successful in his oratory school in Birmingham. This is something that John Henry Newman is often referred to as as in terms of Catholic education, in terms of the university, because of his idea of a university. But he actually spent far more time and far more effort in his life working in elementary and secondary education through the oratory school. And there's some really good work coming out on that. In fact, there's a book coming out by Paul Shrimpton, I believe, by Catholic University Press, very soon. Yes, Alex, yes, and through a Deodatus, right? He's working. Good, yeah. So I know it's coming soon, and I'm very excited. Paul Shrimpton is the foremost expert on Newman in education, I would say. And so today, Newman's vision, I would argue, is carried forward by the institutions that are recommended in the Newman Guide. It's what we're looking for. Exemplars of Newman's own integrity and his concern for the integrity of his students. Many have tried to pigeonhole Newman into an advocate for liberal education. They cherry pick a few of his discourses in his idea of a university, ignoring that these are part of his larger argument for Catholic education. And so I'm not saying that he wasn't an advocate for liberal education. He very much was, and very strongly advocated for it. But he also believed that a secular liberal education was a danger to the church and to the student for the reasons I mentioned, forming students in intellect, but with a stunted conscience and the turmoil of conflicting will and passions. This is what Pope Benedict XVI described when he declared an educational emergency the same year that we released the Newman Guide, 2007. Leaving young people without knowledge of God and without integrity. And as long as I'm speaking of liberal education, let me add one final point about Newman and integrity. When he was named a cardinal and delivered his Biglietto speech, St. John Henry Newman said that his entire life had been dedicated to dispelling the notion of liberalism in religion. And he defined this as the idea that religion is a matter of private judgment, not to interfere with one's education, one's business, or one's politics. And as America today is celebrating our 250th anniversary of liberty, we see our nation falling into radical secularism and even hatred for our Catholic faith, in part because of this notion of liberal religion. And to Newman, this was just another disguise for infidelity. The integrity of Catholics, indeed the integrity of our nation and of human society, depends on citizenship in the kingdom of God as well as our American citizenship. This has a higher law and a supreme lawgiver who in mercy and grace leads us to the true city of God that the pilgrims thought they could establish here. Newman prayed for his students, quote, "May I engage in them remembering the worth of souls, and that I shall have to answer for the opportunities given me of benefiting those who are under my care." His own integrity demanded that he seek the integrity of his students, that they might be whole, that they might be one with God. And that is the sort of faithful formation that is so urgently needed today by Catholic parents. That is the sort of faithful formation that is embraced by Newman Guide Recommended Education, and by Newman's intercession, may it continue to increase across the United States and the world. St. John Henry Cardinal Newman, pray for us. Thank you.